Rebonjour.
Ladies and gentlemen, very welcome here for our last conference for this afternoon, which is linked to the normalization and standardization of products linked to vaping. So we'll deal with the different processes which are in progress and, mainly in France and in UK. First of all, I would like to introduce to you my speakers. Grégory BERTHOU, first of all, which is the Rapporteur for the Strategic Committee in France, but also Katherine GANESH, which is the director of BSI Association, and from Brussels, actually, he came from Brussels, Ashok GANESH, which is the director of Innovation European Committee for Standardization. So, which are the standards in France and in the other countries? So, first of all, before looking at the different presentation, I would like to ask you to introduce yourselves quickly and describe also how you can, what is your appreciation about our fair, about that conference, and if I may, if you could tell us your opinion about standardization. Catherine, would you like to start? Could you please explain to us what is exactly that idea of standardization, trying to sum up the global idea?
Wow, that's a big ask. Basically, we were approached by the British Standards Institute in February this year, and we've got now the base document put together. It's out to steering group, and then we look for input from as many stakeholders as possible to change it and shape it to make it what everybody needs it to be.
Grégory?
Effectivement, nous en France.
In fact, in France, for players, actors in that conference, in that context, the idea is to tell us that the rules this year that will structure our market are being builded, in France, for example. And still, it's the idea to come here, to participate to the construction of those rules. What about you? You understand French, Mr. Ganesh. Please, could you explain in a few words what it means for you, that standardization on a European scale? We've been dealing with that, yesterday, this morning, about French and British rules and standards, but also in America with FDA. What is it really about?
Yeah, the European standards are characterized because they're an agreement, the broadest agreement in Europe. And a European standard is published in all of the European countries as an agreement, as a way of achieving the needs of the industry. So this can start off as a national standard, which is taken up at the European level and then become agreed throughout Europe, which is an incredible impact on and benefit for the stakeholders and for the market.
Et le secteur de la cigarette électronique.
What about the e-cigarette market that you are discovering? Is that something new? Is that something innovative? All the organizations in France and in UK have been working on that, and it is really something new and incredible.
It's more and more new areas, new fields, which are not traditional standardization areas, are coming to European standardization because the agreement which is embodied in a standard is something which can show to the outside world, and particularly organizations like the European Commission, that the industry is serious. The industry is serious about having quality levels and agreed levels of performance. And that's a very strong signal to organizations like the Commission that the industry is serious, is responsible.
Donc nous allons regarder.
So we'll have a look at your presentations with an accurate point of view. Grégory BERTHOU, we'll start with you from AFNOR. Please, would you like to start and explain what AFNOR has been doing till now? Yeah, first of all, before starting the debate, just an overview of AFNOR and its missions. We are an international group of services with 4 big professions: certification, edition, information, and training. And here we are dealing with that precise mission, which is the standardization, thanks to a decree from the ministry in France. And that decree actually will describe AFNOR as the main actor of the French system of standardization. It means that we are in charge of producing, of creating all the conditions. Thanks to these documents will be produced with the actors, together or with all the people. And we are, a French member through the, of course, European Committee. And AFNOR will represent all the French associations. And also, we indeed participate at the international level with ISO standards, of course. We do intervene in all the fields of activity at an economic point of view, since we have a strong need, which is important, to establish rules between players and also between all the actors, could be professionals, but also consumers and public authorities, for example, and they have, public policies as far as safety, security is concerned, because we are in that segment of goods. And our mission is to have the assurance that people are mobilized, are around the table in order to participate to a standard that is the reference and that will be the reference on which everyone will agree. On a consensus, of course. So what is a standard? It is a document, it is a reference, of course, coming from a consensus. And, it is different from regulation in that sense, because it will give solutions to problems, to worries, and to questions also coming from the challenges we need to solve. And we need to face all those activities, little by little. We need to also make a distinctions between all the activities and make a parallel, for example, with the e-cigarette. We are here on products and, how contents are made and liquids and flavors, and we need to determine, all these topics. We need to make surveys, studies in order to check if the product is, related to all these regulations. And one of the main methods, trials, analysis, and one of the challenges in France, at least, is to see how we can define an analysis of those flavors and also the liquids. And then you can have standards which are linked to the organization, for example. And when you deal with processes of production, you have in mind the ISO 9001. Well, this is how we can ensure the way of production. This is totally different from the product which will be on the market, though. So we have 2 cases where standards will, bring solutions, give solutions. And when you have a specific standardization pre-existing on a product, could be, for example, a national decree, or could be also a European directive or something like that. In that case, you have, essential demands with general explanations, and the role of the experts around the table will be to determine in the document the modalities, the ways of working in order to ensure that you will, fulfill all these needs. So that will be important for the conformity, because we'll follow the rule, we'll have the conformity, and that will be really corresponding to the law. And now, when you have, for example, for goods, you do not have regulations which are specific. And in that case, you are in the general security aspect as responsible of, the implementation of a product on the market. And in a way, this standard here is the translation of what we consider as a general idea of security or safety. As far as the French law is concerned, we have L221/1 of consuming goods, services, and I quote, services must follow all the rules according to the professionals and following the standards of conformity. What does that mean? You see here the very general character or specific of that situation. And if you do not have a standard in order to really stress the more detailed ideas linked to safety for one specific product, then in case of control, in case of controversy, you could have difficulties to prove that. So if you have a standard as what we are doing now, so we are trying to build it together with all the players and actors on the e-cigarettes and e-liquids, tomorrow in the future, since we'll have the document and you will have it, you will have the opportunity to follow that document. You won't have any problem. You will really follow the law, and that will be perfect. So you could easily show and have a demonstration on that, and we will fulfill all the regulation. So in a few words, in order to sum up my purpose, our role here in AFNOR is to put together the community of actors, of players, and bring them the follow-up, but also all the advice as far as the methodology is concerned, to go together with them, to help them to elaborate the documents, to enable them to obtain that solution and that answer also, and then we can work as we wish. So, depending on the levels. As my colleague was saying, we started in French, and then the British people also, they did an excellent job, and tomorrow we'll meet, no doubt on that, at a European level. And beyond, we have all the challenges, of course, linked to the new directives coming from tobacco. Good? So here to recap all the aspects in order to work on a methodology. So the actors, how are they treated? How the different organizations work? AFNOR, BSI for the UK. And we work together. We create groups which are open to all parties and all participants in order to bring a new know-how, a new elaboration of the document. So our role is very important, but we have, of course, our expertise, our knowledge on that subject, on that topic, but we are also there to enhance the project, to have the possibility to implement it, to have information on costs and all those elements. Now, as far as the standardization is concerned, and before getting into details of how we can start on the e-cigarette and all the works, I would like here to recall your attention on the standardizations which are linked to different principles. We need to put together the most important categories of people, of actors, and you have professionals, but also distributors, but also manufacturers, and all those people who are in charge of that. So all the organizations, in order to have an evaluation of those aspects, to ensure that we'll have the possibility to check the needs to put inside directives, which could be, labs or inspections or think tanks also. And of course, consumers, they are in the center, and also public authorities. We do work on different levels. We have, technical content, and we actually work in a very impartial way. This is a key principle. We are really, really willing to implement that. And through, of course, the e-cigarette, and we have a concrete example here, and we have had the possibility to succeed in that and put together a community of actors coming from different horizons. Pure players for e-cigarettes, or, different players, different actors coming from different worlds, different horizons, different industries. And the idea is to work together, to go, to enhance that together on the elaboration of our standardization. So, for the kick-off, starting the process, I would like to here stress one important point. We have the capacity to intervene when we have a request, a specific request of one of the actors. Here, specifically, it was a request coming from the movement of the consumers. It was last autumn, if I'm not wrong, together with the French Institute of Consumption, that, wanted us to work on those requests. And together, we have made a first step to check that we could really launch those works. It is an instruction which has been sent to all the actors, all the players that we had identified as, actors or potential actors on the e-liquids market and e-cigarettes market. The idea was to verify that that demand, that request, was really matching with our, willingness, and also sharing the same interests. That was the case. We have organized a first meeting on the 1st of April, and we've had the opportunity to share with all the actors, and we really found a consensus. We wanted to work together. We wanted to stress the main interest. We wanted to establish one commission dedicated to that sense, to that idea. In fact, we did it, and then the second phase, the standardization, in which we still are, it is still in progress. It is step number 2. It is the longest step, actually, because, we have all different meetings. We have the first meeting on the 16th of May, and together we have about 100 players and actors. So around the table, really, we have a lot of interest, a lot of persons, and we want to carry out all these topics. We have a lot of persons, so about 60 to 70 persons. That's excellent, because we have a real interest, we have a real willingness to work together. But in terms of organization, in order to, get to the definition of all the risk, all the points, dealing with that, and also mainly finding an agreement, it can be delicate, difficult. So we have 2 groups of experts in order to go quicker, which meet between each meeting, and one group linked to safety, another group linked to the methods which are used in the analysis. For the safety group, we have Vape as an animator, and for the analysis, we have the National Lab of Trials in France, and that commission needed also to have a president being able to summarize the debates and convalidate the fact that we have found an agreement point by point about all the documents and the future of those documents. So Bertrand Dozenberg, the Professor Bertrand Dozenberg, he is the president of that commission. So we have different fields of intervention, and of course e-cigarettes, which could be refillable and having different liquids with or without nicotine, and all the goods which are liquids, so-called e-liquids. So here you have the schedule, which has been shared, the elaboration of a norm, of an idea, to follow. And I will not go into details here. But anyway, we need to... we'll have 18 months work because we need to, spend a long time on that, and at a European level, we need to, have 33 countries working together, finding agreements. So we have about 3 years' time work, and this is necessary in order to have everyone's opinion, all the countries, and it is a great job. We have that capacity at a European level to go beyond. Maybe 18 months is really the minimum, and we have really an ambitious willingness and project, and we must be able, through that schedule, to have a document which will be a consensus, and also that we will publish at the end of 2014 or the end of 2015. You mean no? At a national level, at the end of 2014 for the first document. Or the beginning of 2015. Okay, well, I think this is the main ambitious objective, but of course that means that we have been able to make a document in about nine months. So instead of 18 months or 3 years, it will be 9 months. So it's very, very good. It's very ambitious. Yes, so please keep in mind where we are today. We have a great mobilization of people and actors and players. They're very representatives of the different interests present on that market. And for the present, we still are following the schedule that had been defined at the beginning. Of course, it will be a first step. Then we'll have the second one, as I said. And since now we have seen that, coming from the European Commission in an annual project dealing with standardization, well, the idea is to carry out the project linked to the request of normalization, which is a mandate, actually. It is its name, so-called mandate, which will be introduced to all the Commission in order to solve all the aspects linked to the products, linked to safety, security of products, of course. So e-cigarette makes part of that request that should arrive on the table. And if I may, quickly, just to conclude, I would like to tell you that inside that commission in France, we have players which are totally conscious of what has been evoked, which means the project, different steps, as you were referring to. And, we see the first standardization in France as a first step. Then we can build on that in a more, precise way, with more details, with more, information, in order really to take into account all the European players. But we have indeed that willingness to get to a European level in the short run. Many thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much. So we have the document of the European Commission. Maybe we could show it on the screen before giving you the floor, Katherine. The European Commission has stated within the framework of the directive, of course, that there could be actions concerning the normalization, standardization, and should be ready. And these are the provisions concerning the rechargeables. Could you tell us something about that?
Yes, indeed.
Ça date de juillet.
This is from July 2014.
This particular bit, we've tried to address this within our standards document with a clause that basically says that if you have a nozzle on the bottle that can fit into the tank or reservoir on whatever type of e-cig it may be, that will do for covering this notion of a leak-free refilling mechanism. Let's think about when you're filling up your car with petrol. There's no leak-free refilling mechanism there. Same with household bleach into the toilet, oven cleaner. There's no leak-free refilling mechanism. So that ought to suffice for that, we believe.
On écoute ta présentation.
We are going to listen to the presentation as far as BSI is concerned.
Yeah, it's there. It's just not there. There it is. Okay. All right. So, as I said before, we were approached in February this year by the British Standards Institute to see if we'd be interested in producing a standard for the sector, well, sponsoring one. But then we spoke with them for a while, and they decided then to ask us to provide the technical authorship of the document. So we've been working on that ever since, and we have our members agreed to sponsor it. And we've done the technical authorship for a base document. This is a first step in the process, much like as Grégory was just saying about joined up first steps, and I hope that these are joined up first steps. We certainly are trying to work in collaboration with our colleagues here in France with a view to going up to Ashok's level at the European level to make sure that there's something cohesive and collaborative that we are all working on together and all can commit to and agree on, so that at the point where we can take it to the European level, we have consensus and we have the majority of the stakeholders along with us. So we have our base document ready. It's gone out now to steering group. The next meeting of steering group is on the 29th of September, so next week, after which it will go to public review, where then more stakeholders can have an input into this. And then the anticipated publication date is 15th of March. The UK Department of Health has observer status on this, and they have indicated to us that they want to use the standard document that we're doing with British Standards to implement TPD as far as is possible. So it's just the scheduling is there to give you an idea, but the notion is that it will be published in early March, ready for No Smoking Day in the UK. So the scope of what we have so far is that it gives recommendations for the manufacture, importation, labeling, marketing and sale. So we're talking there about basically a code of practice for the industry players, but also recommendations for test methods for both e-liquids and hardware. This was one of the biggest problems, and I think we have the working model, at least, for a good solution that I hope we can work on collaboratively with all our partners across Europe and everywhere else that's got an interest in this, to get methods that can solve those intrinsic problems that come with having products in such a huge variety. It's very, very difficult to find methods that can work for all of the different types of products that are available out there. So we've put some suggestions forward for how this might be achieved, and I'll talk about that a little bit. So we do refer to existing standards that already exist in certain areas, such as battery standards and so on, but we believe that there's more to be done in those areas to make it better, specifically for the e-cig sector. So it's the code of practice together with also being applicable to the laboratories and testing houses that are engaged in or are planning to be engaged in the testing for this sector. And again, it needs to be as open as possible and as accessible as possible so that as many vendors as possible are able to access the testing that they need to do. We obviously don't intend to have this apply to any of the vaping products that are licensed as medicinal products. This is for the consumer sector. So the solution that we devised for the testing problem of so many different products is to standardize a device to test all the liquids on, and then standardize a solution to test the devices with, which immediately reduces quite exponentially the number of tests that need to be done. So standard solution, that's something that can be expected to be a normal kind of basic liquid to put through a device to test it, to see what the device itself will emit in terms of vapor. But also the testbed atomizer then can be standardized so that you just know what's coming off from the liquid without it being interfered with by the device. Now this dreadful drawing, I apologize for my drawing skills, but this was just to give everybody an idea of what the apparatus could look like for gathering emissions from e-liquids. So there's the testbed atomizer, which would be connected by a silicon tube to the vacuum trap full of methanol, and then it goes out the other end to the syringe, which has a hydraulic actuator. This would have power applied to it at the same time as the atomizer has power applied to it, so that you can effectively produce the vapor and pull it through the vacuum trap. And you do several cycles of that so that you create then a methanol solution that has trapped the vapor emission from that liquid. That liquid solution in the methanol then can be tested, and we can see then what that emission has given off. Obviously, for gathering emissions from hardware with the standard solution, if you have a pre-filled sort of smaller device that's sold pre-filled as one composite unit, that would be tested as it is, because that's how it's going to be sold, that's how it's going to be used. But where it's possible to remove the atomizing section, then you can detach it from the battery and attach it to the bench power supply, which means that you can test it at a range of power settings, such as we might find out in the market with the products that are on the market. So then all of the tests for liquids would be pretty standard stuff. We'd be talking gas chromatography or other similar method that can detect quantitatively, semi-quantitatively what is in there. And then we need to work on a program of data gathering, really, in the first instance with this standardization process, we believe, so that we can then set some limits on substances that we discover as we get more data that should not be there. We know already about some substances which shouldn't be present in e-liquid. We know about diacetyl. It's avoidable, so let's avoid it. It's not a major problem, but we don't need it there, so let's not have it there. Related ketones as well, T3-pentanedione and that sort of thing. We know about diethylene glycol and ethylene glycol. Those really are going to come out of there being substandard glycols going in, which, again, in the standards process, I'm sure everybody's going to agree that we should have pharma-grade glycols. And then, again, respiratory sensitizers, but we need more data. We need much, much more data. So at this stage, we're looking to suggest that we should have toxicological risk assessments undertaken and then set the limits when we have some data with which to work. And I believe that there's general agreement that that's the best approach at this stage, because it is still an emerging sector. Okay, battery testing, I really was quite keen to include this in the standard, but also in this discussion, because there are standards out there for testing batteries, but actually they're not ideally suited to testing e-cig batteries. So we've designed various machines to safely enclose explosions, because obviously we don't really want to set fire to ourselves. And we can test batteries pushing a lot of power through them and see what happens when they fail. And I'm not suggesting that, we're the test house for this. I'm just saying anyone can do this, but this is the kind of testing that we need to do, because we need to know, what does catastrophic failure of a battery look like? Is it going to be catastrophic, or is it actually just going to do what it should and go vent, pop, not much happens? But we need to know. And if you guys are going to sell batteries to the public, then with your obligations under the General Product Safety Directive, you really need to know what happens when that battery fails, if that battery fails. And with our regulators in the UK, there's been a suggestion that we have to have a certain level of expected abuse from consumers, where you have to expect that they will sometimes use the wrong charger. We all do it, actually. If you think about your phone, your sat-nav, anything like that, if it fits, you're going to stick it on there to charge it. And we have to expect that consumers will not necessarily use the right chargers for batteries. So we need to know for sure that a failure of the battery is not going to be a catastrophic failure, and that people are not going to die. Because actually, the deaths that we've seen so far in the UK, at least from e-cigs, have been batteries that have killed people. Batteries exploding, batteries causing fires. That's where people are getting harmed. It's not the e-liquid. E-liquid's pretty stable and it's calm. It's not a dangerous product. Batteries, potentially very dangerous. So this really does need to be a focus, I think. Battery safety, it's really important. And of course, the safety of the people doing the testing. Tom would have been here, but he couldn't make it, I'm afraid, so you're stuck with me without the beard. And that's it.
Merci beaucoup, Katherine.
Thank you very much, Katherine. Before we give the floor to Grégory, I wanted to know if there are any questions concerning the standardization procedure in France and the United Kingdom. There's a micro going round. Good afternoon, Jacques Loisirs. I'd like to know whether, within the process, AFNOR process, if the scientists were consulted. Well, can you hear me? Of course, the scientific community has indeed been informed on the work and has been mobilized as much as possible. And afterwards, well, the number of representatives from the scientific community, and I was talking before about the different categories of interests. So we would like to employ as many players as possible from the scientific community when we're talking about these kinds of subjects, of course. But it's difficult to say precisely how many people and scientists have been involved in this phase. But the Commission is presided by a representative of the scientific world. And we can also say that the AFNOR Commission is an open process. So as a scientist, you can always join it if you want to. So in France as well, we see that the Ministry of Health is informed about the follow-up of the works and the things that happen. Indeed, that is true. And that was what I said before too. The process is running, but it's not closed. So every week, the project leaders who are in charge of piloting these commissions get new demands from people who want to participate in them. And today, every college, all kinds of players are involved indeed in this commission. But I don't have the exact names, of course. Apparently there's a problem with the microphone. So if I want to take part in it as an expert, then I have to file an application for this. Maybe Katherine or Mr. BERTHOU. Let's take a look at the presentation of you, Mr. GANESH.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to come to Paris and come to Paris on a sunny afternoon. I must say, Grégory's already explained a lot of the things that I was going to explain, and on top of that, he's done it in French. But anyway, I'll carry on in English. But some of these things you'll already recognise. I press the right button? Yeah. Okay. Standards are business tools. Standards, millions of businesses every day use standards and benefit from standards. And that's the people who write standards are representatives predominantly from business. And so we, in CEN, we're in the field of offering a platform, a mechanism, a basis for the creation of European standards. Now, who are we? I think we'll come on to that in a minute. But first of all, standards, you've probably got the idea. Standards are an agreed, repeatable way of doing something, a technical agreement, a technical process, whether it's a technical agreement on the performance of a product or an agreement on a test method. You've already heard the work going on in BSI and AFNOR. Standards, there are lots of standards. There are standards for things at work, standards for things in the home, standards for things at play. So standards are everywhere. People like myself, we don't write the standards. As I said, we offer a platform, a mechanism, a basis for those who want standards to come together to write them. Now, we do that through our members. And we have 33 national members, and 2 of them are AFNOR in France and BSI, the British Standards Institution in the UK. Why are standards important? Why are standards beneficial? I could probably, Grégory and I could probably write something on the back of an envelope that we agree with. I think that just about probably be possible. But the interest and the value in that would probably be between me and Grégory. Whereas the process we offer in terms of standardization is potentially developing a document. The agreement which is stated in that document is of benefit, of relevance to all of Europe. And that's the process in which we're offering, that's the tool which we're offering to achieve things like quality and safety of products, to achieve compatibility with products and systems, so that things could perhaps talk together or interact with each other to make a positive output. Standards allow access to markets. So, for example, with 33 national members, all of who have committed to implement all European standards as their own national standards, then you have equivalent and level technical playing field from the north of Europe to the south, from the east to the west. And even beyond that, as we'll see in a minute. Standards encourage competition. Standards, where an industry comes together to agree a technical standard, that can be the basis for establishing the state of the art. But then, whilst everybody knows what the state of the art is because it's written in the standard, individual organizations can differentiate themselves in the market because they know what they're offering on top and above and beyond what's in the standard. Standards help organizations to reduce their costs, reduce waste, and improve their efficiency. Comply with legislation, and we've just heard about one potential link through the recent European legislation. And codifying new knowledge. I mentioned right at the beginning, standards are a way of bringing new agreements into the domain of standardization, which can then be built on as years go by, based on experience and knowledge and evolutions. So I mentioned 33 national members with the 28, the national standards bodies of 28 European countries in the European Union, plus the 3 countries from the European Free Trade Association, that's Switzerland, Norway and Iceland, and then on top of that there's Turkey and the former Yugoslavian Republic of Macedonia. Those are the 33 countries, very likely to become 34 and 35 in about a year's time. And that gives, the standards therefore give an access to a market of around 600 million consumers by, as I mentioned, that rule of the Club of CEN, that all the members publish all European standards as their own national standard. And that's an incredibly enormous and terrific impact and benefit to the relevant stakeholders who are using that standard or impacted by that standard. Those are the names and the logos of our members. I represent 2 organizations. One is also the CEN and CENELEC. CENELEC works in the electrotechnical field, so those names of those organizations are there. But you'll see some very well-known names. We mentioned AFNOR and BSI, the French and the UK members respectively. There's also the DIN, the Deutsches Institut für Normung from Germany, is a very well-known national standards body. I should also say that we don't work in a vacuum in Europe. Our members are national, but our national members are also members of the international standards bodies. So where it's relevant and where the stakeholders want that, European standards, which can originate in national standards, can find their way very easily up to the international level. And there is a dynamic flow between the European level and the international level for standards and vice versa. We can take over in Europe existing international standards as European standards where the stakeholders want that and see that as beneficial. So we have a continuum through the national, European and the international level of standardization, which means that resources can be used efficiently, where technical agreements, where they reflect the basis for industry-wide, business-wide agreement, can be easily adopted and become the leading technical standard. We currently have about 20,000 European standards in existence through CEN and CENELEC, and that's not because 10,000 would be worse and 30,000 would be better, it just happens to be 20,000, and 20,000 represents the output of all of the stakeholders working in the business domains who want to develop standards through CEN and CENELEC. Those are the sorts of areas we traditionally work in, and you'll see the blue bars at the bottom represent our history standardization for well-known industries in the construction sector, mechanical engineering, in manufacturing sectors. But you'll see, as you come to the top of the list, you'll see standardization in the area of services, materials, food, healthcare, chemistry, and these are growing areas for us. And there are no areas of topics which are not relevant for standardization, except where they are covered by legislation such as pharmaceuticals. Only to elaborate a little bit further, these are the typical areas of work that we're doing at the moment: accessibility, construction, electric technology, consumer products, defence. There's a very wide range of topics. Working in the smart areas, smart cities, smart grids, smart metering, and e-mobility. I mentioned healthcare already. Research and innovation is another area. We're trying to integrate standardization with research outputs. We work by bringing, I mean, Grégory's already said this, we work by bringing together in an organized way. It's very easy to create a system where there's such a lot of interest and a potential input that you can end up with a chaotic and a very lengthy process. One of the benefits that we offer through European standardization is the ability to streamline the inputs through our national members in a coordinated and organized way to develop agreed European standards in a sensible time frame. Normally it's around about 2.5 years, but there's flexibility in that time frame, and it depends also on the starting point. If there's a mature document, such as a national standard, the time frame for developing a European standard can be rather speedy after that. And we come together on and we always agree standards by this magic word, consensus. So we're dealing with standards which are for the benefit of the most number of people. So they're not standards which are inflicted upon large swathes of the population, and at the end of the day our standards are voluntary, so there's no compulsion, at least from the point of the standardization community, to use any particular standard. I think this slide represents again one that Grégory put on the screen. We talk about European standardization through European technical processes, technical committees, but based on inputs which are coordinated through our national members, such as AFNOR and BSI. And that's a key element. That's a way of the stakeholders working sensibly together at national level, coming together, deciding what standards they want, what they want to write in the standards, and bringing those needs to be discussed and agreed at the European level in an organized and concerted way. So European standards are basically market-driven documents. They're not written by people like me sitting in my office in Brussels saying now, today, aha, what are we going to inflict on Europeans? I don't have the knowledge, the technical knowledge in any field to write a standard, but I know how our system works, and we try to offer with my colleagues the system, the platform, the mechanism to allow those who do have needs for standards and do have technical knowledge to come together to write the standards they want. So an open and transparent process representing potentially all interested parties. We can't make anybody sit around the table and discuss a standard, but equally we don't turn anybody away. So it's up to those organizations who are interested to come together to give their input. I mentioned consensus. Then there's this national commitment to implement the result of the European standards process as European standards document, but published at national level, which allows and achieves a technical coherence. You can imagine a set of standards in any particular field, whether it be the railway industry or the aircraft industry. The standards that they develop together represent a suite of coherent technical agreements, which is a very sound and very powerful mechanism for the industry to enter into contracts and to trade and to show that they are working together and meeting agreed levels of safety or protection of the environment or protection of the consumer, for example. It could be many other attributes as well. I think that's it for me. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening to me. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thanks to you. I have a couple of questions as respect to your presentation. First of all, as far as the modalities of working, functioning of the commissions, you were dealing with 33 countries. I've understood that you have a system of vote which is different. For example, in Europe, in UK and France, you have a stronger weight. Could you please tell us a bit more about the decision inside the commissions?
Yeah, there is. I mean, I mentioned we work on this, and it's the same at national level through AFNOR for BSI. We work on consensus. We're talking about standards which are agreed, represent agreement. But of course, we need to have processes which are timely, which are understandable, and we do have phases, predominantly two, where there is a vote. And the national members vote on the creation or the initiation of new standards work, because that has an impact on the members later on and the market players, because when a new piece of standardization work starts, if it's successful, it will lead to the implementation and publication of national standards later, the same European standard published nationally. So that has an impact on the members and their resources. So there is a vote. The last vote, the second vote, is the vote on the final text of the proposed European standard. And the reason that that's a vote is to be clear. Is there consensus or not? And the voting that we have in CEN and CENELEC is based on national weighted votes. And the weighted votes are actually given in accordance with the European Union Nice Treaty. So the same weight is given to within our, although CEN is a private organisation, we've adopted this good practice. And so countries which have the biggest business sectors, the biggest industries linked to population, so for example Germany, the UK, France, they will have predominantly a bigger weighted vote. But every member has a vote, and there's a threshold of 69% of the weighted vote which has to be achieved for the agreement of a European standard. I wouldn't overplay the voting, because the voting is there to confirm a level of agreement, and the agreement is achieved predominantly through discussion, contributions, exchanges between experts, who they will know whether they've achieved agreement or not. The voting is simply a record to say, look, at this point on this day, there was this result of the vote. And that's how it works.
Merci, Jean.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, actually. The last. It is true that here with Vape, we are dealing with questions like standardization in France, in the UK, but also at a European level. Should we have a problem with innovation? Are we breaking the innovation? Because we need innovation, and we need people maybe who are afraid of innovation. What could you answer those people who are afraid of innovation? And then, second question linked to innovation. As we have seen with AFNOR, it is not so easy to have a dialogue, to find a consensus between French people or British people, for example. So how shall we find a consensus? What is your advice to have a good work done on standardization at a European level through Brussels, for example? What is your advice to get to a consensus at a European level?
Very interesting question on innovation, and it is a source of a lot of debate. Some people do see standardization as something which can stifle and slow down innovation. I see it the opposite. Standardization can allow, is almost a stepping stone, can achieve a level of agreement, even on technologies or areas where there is perhaps quite 100% experience or agreement. But standards are living documents, and standards can represent a first step. Today, or say in 2015, stakeholders can come together and say, look, we can agree at this point in time on this level of a technical agreement on a product or a test method. Because the standard can always be modified later, improved later, based on experience, based on feedback, based on usage. And so standardization is not something to be frightened of in that way. Standardization is a tool. So there is a lot of discussion on this use of standardization to support innovation. I would give one very simple example. We have, most of us in our pockets, we have a telephone, a potable phone. And it's based, I'm sure, on the GSM standard. Now, the GSM standard is a standard which came in Europe and actually found agreement when there were many other standards that were being used throughout the world. But in fact, because the Europeans came together and others in other parts of the world followed, we more or less have a global standard for telephone usage. Telephone is the GSM standard. And that was definitely an area of innovation. And that allowed an industry to grow and to coalesce around one technical documentation. The answer to the second question is, I think it depends on which level we're talking. I think we have a process which is well documented and it's open and transparent. You can see on if you do www.sen.eu, you'll find all our rules and procedures, arguably too many rules and procedures, but they're there for good reason. And you'll see that it is a process which is well understandable. You can boil it down into 5 or 6 steps. There are some rules which make the process work, but I would say your field, e-cigarettes, is on a good track. You're working in at least 2 national members. You have 2 documents which are coming to finishing in the next few months. I'm sure there are other parts of the industry in other countries who are already talking to our SEN members, and if they can come together and agree, yes, we want to create something, we don't know what we're going to agree on today, but let's start the work. Experts are joined up and linked, talking to the national members of SEN in the different countries. They're organising and coordinating amongst themselves, focusing on a goal of achieving standards, the technical content of which that'll come out in the wash, that'll come out as we come through the process. But the 2 things are come together, come to the process with an open mind, with a willingness to exchange and find agreement. You will get there very easily.
Sorry, if I can just ask one other question on that. The process, as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that we need to have a commitment to a European standard from 5 of the national member state organisations, but not necessarily a national process in all of those member states, but a commitment to a European process. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. Then there needs to be 5 of our national members. I mentioned this voting to initiate standardisation, and that's because 5 members need to be representing a push from the national stakeholders to say, yes, we support the creation of a European standard, because that indicates that there is resource to write the standard. It represents that there is market need, because standards are based on market needs. And so the 5 is a sort of a way of testing the temperature, testing the water to make sure that it's not just something which has a very narrow following, but 5 represents a good balance. And it doesn't, you're absolutely right, it doesn't need to say that there are 5 processes of national standardization working already, certainly not. It doesn't mean that there should be any national standardization work going on at the moment. There are in at least 2 countries, and that's already why you're ahead of other examples that I could share with you of other topics which have come to European standardization. But the main thing is stakeholders should be in as many countries in Europe as possible. Stakeholders should start to become organized. They should make contact with the national standards body. And if you don't know who that is, it's easy. Contact me and I'll tell you, and I'll put you in touch with the national standards body in whichever country you need.
Dans la conférence précédente,
In the previous conference on the European standardization, I would like to deal with e-cigarette. Here, we have dealt with the transposition in different countries. In a parallel way, we have works of standardization in the UK and in France. How do you see the relationship between the works of standardization in Europe and the transposition of the European directive? Are there links to be built between those 2 channels in order to define a regulation and the standardization of the e-cigarettes and e-products, together with the documents of the European Union?
I should say that there are at least two worlds working, and sometimes they're working completely independently, and that's perfectly fine. The world of regulation, European laws and regulations, and that can be a completely separate world which impacts all of us Europeans. And then we have the second world, which is the world of business. Now, standards are business tools. Now, there are some times where the two worlds, regulatory world and the standards world, they touch. There are some links. Those links are where there is agreement between the regulators and the stakeholders, the business, but the wider world of stakeholders. It can not only be just the business community, but the business community are the prime drivers. But there can be agreements that a standard can either be written or an existing standard identified, which supports the implementation of European legislation. Now, it's a bit, in English we say chicken and egg, and I'm sure there are lots of very good French terms which are better than the chicken and egg, which say that the standardization need can come first, and then the European Commission can say, that's a good standard that can support the implementation of some regulation. Or it can come the other way around, that there is a European law or regulation, and the business community says, well, if we organize ourselves and write a standard, we can help ourselves to be in line with the law. Or the two things can happen in parallel. And here I think we're approaching a parallel process. The Commission has indicated that they have an intention to ask for standards to be developed which support the implementation of regulation. And here we have also at the same time the business community, your community coming together, writing standards and have an eye on European standards. And I think we have the perfect opportunity to align these two needs. And it's clear the Commission, we've seen it already, has outlined in their work programme for 2015 that they are very strongly contemplating the idea of a request to make standards. Now, the Commission can make as many requests as it wants, and there are very nice requests, and we will help them with that. But if there are no stakeholders who want to write the standards, then the request will come to nothing. Here we have almost a perfect situation evolving. The Commission has indicated a wish to have standards to help the achievement, the application, the enforcement's the wrong word, but the coherence with the legislation. And we have on the other hand the business community coming together and saying, look, we want to support and protect our businesses and advance our businesses through European standards. We're almost got a perfect match potentially being made. And our role from SEN with our members is to help this along by making the right contacts, keeping the respective parties informed of what's going on, and hopefully in 2015 this will very quickly come together and everybody will be moving along in agreement.
Merci. On nous signale que...
Thank you. We need to conclude now. Do you have other questions from the audience to ask to our speakers? So no question. So many thanks to you all, for three of you to have participated to our debate. So really, I hope to see you soon. Many thanks.